But Caroline, I think this is the best coaching job. If they finish the season 11-1, it might be the best coaching job Nick Saban's ever done. You got to give a lot of credit to Tommy Rees.
Yeah.
Very young, very green, stepping into a massive job there and coming from Notre Dame and just kind of figuring it out for this team and this offense as the season's gone on.
But look at where this Alabama team started. I mean, losing to Texas and Texas looking like the dominant team. Alabama getting bullied up on both lines of scrimmage. Close game against South Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trailing at the half in 3 SEC games against A&M, against Ole Miss, and against Tennessee.
Yep.
You find
barely
ways
beat
to
Arkansas.
Win. Barely beat Arkansas. You let Arkansas get back into the game with you. Tied at halftime in a shootout against LSU. And I said all last week, if this game gets into a shootout, LSU wins. Because I don't think that this Alabama offense is constructed to get into a shootout like that. They proved me wrong. Alabama continues to prove me wrong. So absolutely credit to Tommy Rees and to Nick Saban, this entire coaching staff. And I thought, look, I think Alabama's most clear path to victory is running the football. Because, Jalen Milroe can air it out 80 yards and take advantage of a young, inexperienced LSU secondary. But what good is it if you're Alabama to throw the ball 80 yards deep and score in less than a minute just to give the ball back to Jaden Daniels and that LSU offense?
Yeah.
It's not. Run the clock out and run the football. But LSU wasn't willing to make those defensive adjustments. They weren't willing to spy Jalen Milroe and at least stop him from getting out of the pocket and making plays with his legs. So it's a tough one for LSU to swallow because you could have won it. You didn't because of what was on the table. SEC West Championship, Heisman Trophy for Jaden Daniels, potentially maybe a CFP bid. Now all of that is out the door.
Yeah.
And now Jaden Daniels' status against Florida this weekend is in question. It's a tough one to swallow for LSU.
Let me ask you this. Assuming, we'll talk about Florida before we move on from LSU. Assuming LSU beats Florida and beats A&M, particularly if Max Johnson's unable to go, that because A&M, I'm not writing them off again. Why would you? They were beating Bama at halftime, beating Tennessee at halftime, came down to the final play at Ole Miss, final minutes against both Bama and Tennessee. Why would you think that they couldn't go compete with an LSU team that didn't fare as well against Bama as A&M did, that did lose to Ole Miss just like A&M on the final play? Of course, different style of game, but let's just say they do, and they finish 9-3. Because I think we know if they go 8-4, we're going to call that a pretty disappointing season on the Bayou.
For sure.
If they go 9-3 and they're 6-2 in the SEC, and Jaden Daniels is a Heisman finalist, hell, he might win it, but let's say he's a finalist. Just keep it there.
Yeah.
Is that a successful year too for Brian Kelly, or do folks in Baton Rouge consider that a disappointment?
I'll answer that in two different ways. Will the folks in Baton Rouge think it's a disappointment? Yes. But I think the fair answer is, well, you were ahead of schedule on year one. That you basically had to pick up a bunch of broken pieces defensively and just tape it up with duct tape and just hope that it would work. And it did. They were successful. And you were able to beat Alabama in year one and kind of take advantage of an SEC West that was beating up on one another. That opened up a path for LSU to get to the SEC championship game. And look, last year wasn't pretty, but getting to the SEC championship game in year one, who wouldn't take that?
Anybody would.
I think LSU was a bit ahead of schedule. That if you would have told any LSU fan when Brian Kelly was hired that in year two, you're going to be 9-3, I think anyone would take that.
Yeah.
But last year raised expectations, maybe fairly so, maybe unfairly so. I'd be fine with 9-3 as long as there is a hope to fix the areas that need fixing, but also with the underlying gray cloud of you're not going to have Jaden Daniels next year. You're not going to have Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas next year. You might not have Logan Diggs next year. That if you continue to rework the defense, well, simultaneously next season, you're going to have to rework the offense as well.
I'll be interested to see, if Jaden Daniels can't go. I know people like Nuss. Garrett Nussmeier can sling it. He's got that gunslinger in him. He's a passer. He's got the weapons to throw it to. I still think regardless of what happened in the second half of that Georgia game, I mean, the drop off is massive from Daniels to Nussmeier, and you'd be going. Now, fortunately, that one's in Baton Rouge, correct? You'd be going into that game though. I think it would be dicier, right? Because your defense isn't going to carry you to a victory like historically LSU defenses can do.
Gosh, no.
If they lose that game and LSU finishes 8-4 or worse, but 8-4, okay. If they lose that game and they finish 8-4, I think there's a flip side to the Brian Kelly coin where you're going to go. And it's a lot of people don't get this when it's coming from an Aggie because Lord knows you've got a ton of ammo to throw at me if you're like social media and want to come at me, for A&M's. But we're talking LSU here. And I'm trying to talk about it completely unbiased because it really is at this point. If LSU has 8 losses in 2 years, a lot of people say, well, he won the West in year one. I know that would be. But if they lose 8 games in 2 years and have 4 losses each season under Kelly, I do think there would be some people in Baton Rouge that go, this better get a lot better. We'll see. I mean, again, I think they're gonna write. I think Jaden will probably. I don't know. That looked pretty. By way of concussion, that one look. I might be surprised if he's out there, but I think they can win at home. I think they can score enough with those weapons and Nuss. If they don't, interesting story. Probably right now a lot more interesting story in College Station, and being perfectly honest, a more interesting story in Oxford.
Yeah.
Talk about give me your take on what went down Saturday morning. Ole Miss 38, A&M 35. The Aggies and our guy Max Johnson with a pretty gutsy effort. Broken rib, 300 yards, 31 of 42. Gives the Aggies the lead with under 5 minutes left, and that defense they've leaned on so much this year couldn't get the stop. They get the ball back. A special teams. The special teams couldn't execute there at the finish line, and instead of overtime, Ole Miss with a walk-off victory. What were your takeaways from Oxford?
First of all, you can say whatever you want about Max Johnson. What you can't say is that he's not tough.
No.
That he's not going to put every single ounce of himself into the game on the field, and he's going to leave it on the field. Yeah. I don't know if that was ever in question, but I think Saturday was the perfect example of Max Johnson just being a team first guy and just being a football guy. It's tough because when it comes down to a missed field goal, and you look at all the other opportunities, because it's tough to put it on that. Because there were so many other things that led up to needing a field goal to potentially take it to overtime and keep your hopes for winning alive. Look, Ole Miss's offense is really good. Unfortunately, I was on the receiving end of it just a few weeks ago when Ole Miss dropped 50 plus and over 700 yards on this LSU defense. I think that Jackson Dart was able to pick apart a Texas A&M secondary that, frankly, has struggled for a good bit of the season. It's majority of the reason why Texas A&M lost to Miami was because Tyler Van Dyke was able to pick apart that young secondary. Quinshon Judkins is really tough to stop. But what I don't get, Billy, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is I look at Texas A&M, how good that defensive front is. 30 TFLs in 2 back-to-back weeks against Auburn, and then who was the next week?
Auburn and Arkansas.
Auburn and Arkansas. So we know what they can do. We know there's talent.
I mean, they got after Milroe.
You gave up over 100 rushing
Milton.
yards to Quinshon Judkins, and then you let Tennessee rush for over 200, 250 just a couple of weeks ago. That really is what it came down to me.
Yeah, me too. And look, Jackson Dart was the MVP. You look at his numbers. They only sacked him once. I thought he did a terrific job of getting rid of the football and not taking sacks under pressure. He's another one
who is tough as nails.
He is.
To give credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. He really is. He's not scared. I don't like the way he runs his mouth. It's, he's
a product of his coach.
He is. And it's you have every opportunity to do something about it. You have 60 minutes to do something about it, and Bama did something about it. And I think, other teams have not this year. So, I mean, he's a competitor. I respect the game. I respect the way he plays. He's tough.